tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
A committee of members of parliament is looking into the airport situation right now. They had a brief meeting today, and it sounds like Omar Alghabra, the transport minister, will have to take their questions, which is a step in the right direction, but it's like the whole 44% thing. It might be a step in the right direction, but I wouldn't call it a solution. Joining me now is the Conservative MP and transport critic, Melissa Lantsman. Melissa, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, I mean, let's start with the 44% number here. Is this anything that anyone should be happy with?
Well, I don't think that that any progress at Pearson, like you said, is meaningful in any way or has improved in any way for any passenger travel. We've made international headlines. We're Pearson being the worst, Montreal being second worst. I don't think that's a metric that anybody wants to be on, and I think we're at the peak of travel season still. And so the government could let the peak travel season peter out and claim victory. But I think the damage is done on our reputation. I know many people who will avoid Pearson at all costs.
There's an economic challenge too. I mean, one area where airlines try to make money is by letting people connect through Canada. So you could theoretically fly from Heathrow to New York and have a layover in Toronto. I don't think any traveler is booking an itinerary like that now. You've got people that, and this is anecdotal, but it's happening in large enough numbers that I don't think it's inconsequential. People that have said, I'm just going to hold off on my trip now because I just am seeing all the horror stories of baggage terminals and customs lines and not wanting to do it. And, the reality is that all of these different problems are coming from different places. We've got problems with staffing in the airlines and with customs shortages, and we've got problems that exist at other airports as well. I mean, Heathrow and Dublin have had their challenges. How much is at the government's feet, in your view, the Canadian government's feet?
Well, look, the government is, they control CATSA, which are the guys that check, that screen you. They control CBSA, which are primarily the backlogs in our customs hall. You've heard stories. You've probably, I've seen you internationally in the last little while, and I'm not sure that if you've had problems getting off, but they're holding people on planes for much longer. So the government's abdicated its responsibility by touting these metrics, and we're just not sure what these metrics are based on. 15 minutes through security. Well, is that based on 24 hours where for 6 or 7 of those hours there's nobody that goes through security? We have a lot of questions for the minister. Today we had a committee meeting to call the minister. We'll see the minister before the 19th of August in front of our committee for 2 hours, and we'll ask him about the inconsistencies on our check-in standard, which is nowhere else in the world does anybody tell you to come to the airport 3 hours early, or what he said on critical issues facing our airports, like whether he talked about none of this being staffing or demand, and then he talked about staffing and demand being the problem. We're not even at 100% of our travel. So the fact that we're number one and number two for the worst, that's a huge problem for our economy. It's a huge problem for travel and tourism, and it's a huge problem that doesn't seem to be going away for travelers.
When you mentioned the timeline earlier, I think that's a very real issue. I mean, the big family vacations are going to be done in basically 4 weeks' time when kids go back to school. And at that point, I think it's a race to see how much we can make this work so business travel can pick back up. And then we're looking at, how Thanksgiving long weekend and then Christmas. But I mean, at this point, if the government is in denial that there's a problem, at least publicly, a solution really isn't on the table. So how much more can you get from a government that's been, so ostrichy about this and just sticking its head in the sand and not really addressing this, even if the minister is going before your committee in a couple of weeks' time, max?
Look, we want to see that this doesn't happen again, or that it doesn't continue to happen. Business travel is almost back, or certainly is returning. And you've got to think that if you're coming here from New York or from Pennsylvania, and it's an hour to get here, and you're 3 hours on the tarmac, nobody's going to want to come. We want to explore issues like ArriveCan. We've called for scrapping that app, and we haven't seen any movement or any even accommodation from the government. So again, lots of questions, lots of things to fix, and we want to ensure that if we do face the situation again, that we aren't caught off guard like we were.
Yeah, I think that's a huge, huge problem here. And it sounds like someone's in the background's been on the tarmac a little bit too long. And I'm totally sympathetic, I must say. But the ArriveCan one is huge. And again, the government is really the ArriveCan, and they haven't owned up to it. But it's clear that they're trying to make this a permanent fixture of travel. And again, the inconsistency. They're telling us this speeds things up. It makes things easier. But all it does is put more barriers when you have people that haven't traveled in 2 and 3 years, that are not particularly savvy. They aren't technologically capable necessarily, and they're trying to do all this for the first time. And you're right. I mean, you've traveled. Obviously, I've traveled. We sort of have tried to keep up with what the rules are and stay within them. But for a lot of people that haven't done this, they turn on the news. All they see are the examples of things that are really telling them why now is not the time to travel. And it's incredibly unfair to people that for the longest time couldn't travel because of quarantine restrictions, vaccine mandates, couldn't travel because of the COVID situation. They didn't feel safe and healthy. And now the thing that's holding them up is entirely manageable and preventable.
For sure. The government has staked frankly its entire border economy again on a $25 million app that they've paid for. And it's not only just the people not having confidence in being able to use it. There's real issues. Perhaps you don't have a smartphone. Perhaps English and French isn't your first language. There's been no accommodation. Even making it voluntary would be at least a step in the right direction. That if the government claimed this app would work, then maybe people would actually use it. But we don't have that option, and we've seen it. I've been to Windsor, I've been to Niagara in the last couple of weeks, and we're seeing, there's no American plates at the duty free. There's no American plates coming over the border. Motor coach traffic is down to maybe 1 or 2 buses a day, whereas you would see 40 in this peak travel. So the problem is very real, and the fact that the government's not addressing it, not talking about it, and not even acknowledging it suggests that I think they're completely out of touch.
Yeah, I think you're very right about that. I know you've been putting a lot of the pressure on yourself against this government, and I would encourage you to keep it up. Obviously, we need some reckoning here. And again, this is affecting people that aren't conservative, that aren't liberals. They just want to live their lives. So
Sure.
Something's got to give. Melissa Lantsman, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.